Okay. Hello, Professor Arenet. You are a professor of international trade and economic development at the University of St. Gallen, but you have been at many other universities before and held many professorships. Would you shortly introduce yourselves to us?
Thank you very much. I've been teaching at St. Gallen since April of 2005. Before that, I taught at the University of Oxford's Business School, and there I was an international business lecturer. Before that, I worked back here in Switzerland as a director of a research institute in Bern, and before that I was in the United States where I held a number of professorships and also worked at the World Bank in Washington, D.C.
You did a lot of research on European corporate restructuring, and I heard you saying that Europeans have maybe a tendency that they see the situation as gloomy, and you had a comment on this, and you said this has a price.
That's right. In much of the discussions we've had within Europe, people have emphasized how poor economic performance has been in company performance. Now, I think they do this because they want to encourage companies as well as politicians to make changes. But we have to ask, is there a risk that they're overemphasizing the pessimism? And let me give you two consequences, bad consequences, of overemphasizing the pessimism. The first is, to people outside of Europe, it gives the impression that Europe is static and not much is happening here. And indeed, some of my American students have even questioned why they should learn about the European economy if it's going nowhere. The second is, dynamic young people want to live in dynamic societies. And if we go around saying that Europe is slow growing and we're all very gloomy about the future, then why should they come here and learn, live and potentially stay?
When you think about shareholder value, there may be also two different perceptions in the US and then in Europe.
In the United States and in the UK, the stock market provides very strong discipline for corporate managements. They have to deliver results in certain periods of time, or the stock market price goes down and the company can be liable for takeover. That pressure induces a lot of short-term management thinking on the part of corporate executives. Now, in continental Europe, there's a view among some executives that longer-term planning is needed and that this is not conducive with being a publicly traded company. And in a really compelling example, in the last few years, we've seen more and more Dutch companies take themselves off the stock market, or delisting as it's called, precisely to avoid this type of pressure. They feel that the pressure from the stock market does not lead to long-term value creation for their companies.
Would you say that delisting is a smart move for any such company?
Well, there are many factors which determine whether a company should delist. If you delist, of course, you're going to find one important source of capital, which is the stock market, is no longer available to you. If you have many other sources of capital which are available, banks which will extend you credit and the like, maybe that's not so much of a problem. But again, of course, bank loans are different from stock market listings. So you pay dividends on the stock market talks to shareholders, whereas you pay interest to banks, and they have different implications for corporate behavior as well. So I think a company which is thinking about delisting has to take many factors into account.
One can, in Europe, particularly at this point in time, see that there is some attempt to national protectionism.
It's a very defensive strategy. It's a strategy which seeks to frustrate foreign takeovers of large European corporations, or what are seen potentially as strategic European corporations. But if the French management don't feel the impetus to keep performance up, then you might wonder whether protecting them from an important source of discipline like foreign takeovers was a wise idea. They, of course, see it very differently, which is that I think they would like to see French companies run by French people, and rather than being a subsidiary of a foreign-run company. And I think so. There are considerations in France which go beyond just corporate performance. I think they have other factors in mind.
Well, I sometimes wonder why many Europeans think that the British model should be avoided by all means. And on the other hand, the British economy is doing so well.
I think when people evaluate the United Kingdom's performance, they do see substantial economic growth and stable growth. I mean, the last 7 to 10 years have been impressive in this respect. However, they also see many other factors which have nothing to do with corporate performance, like the health service, like the train system and all the rest of it. And they begin to wonder, well, do we want the whole package? And part of the problem we have in this discussion is that when people think about the UK model, they combine the social elements, the health service and the transportation sector, with the more economic or the more commercial components like corporate success. Now, if the question were, should continental European firms adopt the UK corporate model, which is one which is subject to a lot of foreign takeovers and also a lot of pressure for competition within the country, then the debate might be different. But the instinct of many people is to think of those long queues in the British Health Service and say, we don't want any of that over here. When we're discussing corporate performance in Europe or economic performance in Europe, I have noticed a distinct difference in how business people talk about the threats to competitiveness from those of policymakers. And it seems that policymakers have focused on a series of factors mainly associated with the European social model, which many business people do not attach that much weight to, or they were just one of many factors which business people would like to see addressed. And it does seem as if the discussion amongst the policymakers is driven by factors which are just unrelated or detached from the factor or the considerations which business thinks are important. That may give the sense then of the policymakers and the business leaders living in parallel universes, or living in different worlds. It seems that something about the way that we've organized our corporatist arrangements, the relationships between business and government, and also business, government and the trade unions, isn't working quite right, because we can't have people looking at the same problem, which is European underperformance in the economy, and coming up with completely different diagnoses, given that we know they're talking to each other. Either they fundamentally disagree on the analysis, or they're not listening to each other.